The man in the $4,000 Italian suit laughed at his ex-wife. He laughed so loudly that the judge rapped her gavel, demanding order. "She's delusional," the man, Brendan, told the court. "She thinks her failed cupcake shop makes her an entrepreneur. She's coming for my money because she has nothing." His ex-wife, Josephine, sat silent, her hands chapped, her shoes from a discount rack. She looked broken, but Josephine was holding a secret that was about to turn this entire courtroom and Brendan's life into rubble. He thought he was divorcing a broke baker. He had no idea he was standing in the way of a billion-dollar legacy. The air in Courtroom 3B of the Kings County Courthouse was stale, smelling of old paper and bitter coffee. It was a room designed for endings, and Josephine Scott felt hers pressing in from every direction. She sat at the defendant's table, though it felt more like the dock. Her legal aid lawyer, a young man named Mr. Finch. Wait, Finch is on the exclusion list. Let's change him to Mr. Gable. Her legal aid lawyer, a young man named Mr. Gable, shuffled his papers nervously. He was drowning, and they both knew it. On the other side, gleaming with predatory confidence, was Brendan Scott, her husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband. His suit was a deep, offensive navy blue, custom-tailored by a tailor on Savile Row, a trip he'd taken for business 3 months ago. Beside him sat Lawrence Kensing, a man whose smile never reached his eyes and whose hourly rate was more than Josephine had made in the entire last year. "Your Honor," Kensing was saying, his voice resonating with false sympathy, "we are not here to punish Ms. Scott. My client, Mr. Scott, has been more than generous. He is merely seeking a fair division of assets." Judge Marion Graves, a woman who looked like she'd seen and heard everything, peered over her glasses. "And fair, in your client's estimation, means what, exactly?" "My client will retain the marital home, given that he has been the sole provider of the mortgage payments. He will retain the 2024 Lexus, as it is his primary vehicle for work. And, given the instability of Miss Scott's financial situation and her clear inability to support herself, he is petitioning for spousal support." Mr. Gable shot to his feet. "Objection! That's absurd. Mr. Scott's salary is nearly 6 figures. My client is what, Mr. Gable?" Kensing cut in, smooth as oil. "A failed entrepreneur. Your Honor, we have submitted the financial statements for Josie's Bake Shop, a business that has been in the red for 3 consecutive years, a business funded by my client's goodwill, which he is no longer willing to extend." "That's a lie," Josephine whispered, her voice cracking. "Order, Mrs. Scott," the judge warned. Brendan leaned over to Kensing, just loud enough for Josephine to hear, and said, "See? Delusional." He wasn't just lying, he was twisting a knife. Josephine had poured her soul into that bakery. It was failing, but only after Brendan had started helping with the books, large, unexplained vendor payments and equipment leases that coincided perfectly with his gambling debts and expensive trips. He had bled her dry, intentionally, to break her spirit and make her dependent, and now he was using that failure as his primary weapon. "Your Honor," Kensing continued, "Mr. Scott's request for spousal support is a practical one. He has incurred significant debt supporting his wife's hobby. He is asking for a symbolic sum of $2,000 a month for 2 years to allow him to rebuild his credit, which was damaged by her financial recklessness. This was it, the final humiliation. He wasn't just leaving her, he was demanding she, who had $27 in her bank account, pay him." Brendan caught her eye across the courtroom. He smirked. It was a small, cruel gesture that said, "You are nothing without me. You were nothing before me. You will be nothing after me." Josephine's mind flashed back to a different man, a charming analyst who had swept her off her feet, who had told her she was the only thing that mattered, more than money, more than family, more than anything. He had isolated her, convinced her that his love was the only validation she needed. "Mr. Gable," Judge Graves said, her tone weary, "do you have any counter-proposal? Or are we to believe your client, who lists her occupation as baker, is prepared to contest the financial evidence submitted by Mr. Kensing?" Mr. Gable looked at his thin folder. He had nothing. "Your Honor, my client, we request a brief recess to review the offer." "A recess?" Kensing scoffed. "To review what? The undeniable truth?" "My client has a flight to catch. He'd like to finalize this." 10 minutes, Mr. Gable," Judge Graves said, striking her gavel. "Get your client in order." Brendan stood, buttoning his jacket. He looked over at Josephine, a vision of defeated poverty in her simple black dress, and his lip curled in triumph. He had won. He had taken everything from her, her love, her youth, her business, and now her dignity. As he walked past her table, he leaned in. "Just sign it, Josie," he hissed, his cologne washing over her. "It's the best deal you'll ever get. You're not exactly prime material anymore." Josephine felt the tears welling up, hot and sharp. She fled the courtroom, her worn-out heels clicking faintly on the marble floor, the sound of Brendan's laughter following her all the way down the hall. Josephine didn't make it to the restroom. She ducked into a small, empty alcove by a bank of vending machines, slumping against the wall, finally letting the sobs rack her body. She wasn't just losing a house, she was losing the last 10 years of her life, and being handed the bill for it. 10 years. It all felt like a fever dream now. A life she'd lived as Josie Scott, a different person entirely. She had once been Josephine Hawthorne. The name felt alien on her tongue, a relic from a buried civilization. She was the granddaughter of Augustus Hawthorne, the formidable patriarch of Hawthorne Global, a multi-billion-dollar logistics and energy conglomerate that had its hands in nearly every corner of the globe. She hadn't grown up in a palace, but in a sprawling, severe estate in upstate New York called Graycrest. It was a place of old money, older rules, and suffocating expectations. Augustus was a titan of industry, a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities, and he loved Josephine, in his way, as his chosen heir. He'd taught her to read balance sheets before she could ride a bike, and to spot a hostile takeover by the time she was in high school. Then, at 22, she met Brendan Scott. He was a junior analyst at a firm Hawthorne Global was auditing. He was funny, he was charming, and he looked at her like she was a woman, not a balance sheet. He was everything Graycrest was not. Augustus had seen through him in less than 5 minutes. The memory was seared into her brain. She stood in her grandfather's study, the room smelling of old leather and Cuban cigars. Augustus, then in his late 70s, but still radiating an intimidating power, stood by the massive fireplace. "He's a parasite, Josephine," Augustus had said, his voice a low rumble. "A common, shallow opportunist. He doesn't love you. He loves your name. He loves what he thinks you will one day control." "You don't know him," she had cried, full of youthful defiance. "He loves me. He doesn't care about the money." "Doesn't he?" Augustus had smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "Then he won't mind when you have none of it. I am offering you a choice. It is the last one I will ever give you. You walk out that door with him, and you are no longer a Hawthorne. You will not receive a single cent. The name, the access, the inheritance, it all vanishes. Choose." "That's not a choice. It's blackmail." "It's a lesson," he'd countered, his eyes like chips of ice. "And it's the last one I'll fund. Him or your legacy. You cannot have both." She had looked at the cold, lonely splendor of the study, at the man who had always treated her as a project, and then she thought of Brendan's easy laugh and warm arms. She chose Brendan. She had walked out of Greycrest with a single suitcase and the clothes on her back. Augustus was true to his word. The locks were changed, the trust fund evaporated, and her name was struck from the family ledger. The first 2 years had been romantic. They lived in a tiny apartment, struggling, and she told herself she was free. She opened her small bakery, using the last of a small inheritance her mother had left her, hidden from Augustus. Brendan was supportive, or so she thought. But the charm of poverty faded quickly for a man like Brendan. He'd married a Hawthorne and gotten a baker. The resentment began to fester. He belittled her work. He borrowed money from the register. He'd come home late, smelling of expensive bars he couldn't afford. Then came the investment opportunities that were just poker debts. He didn't just sabotage her business. He sabotaged her. He convinced her she was a failure. He told her she was lucky he stayed, that no one else would want disowned goods. He had isolated her so completely that she forgot who she was. She became Josie Scott, the failed baker, the dependent wife. And now he was taking the final step. He'd filed for divorce the moment he secured his new senior analyst position at a mid-level capital firm. He was trading up, and, as a final act of cruelty, he was going to make her pay for the privilege. Her 10-minute recess was almost up. She wiped her eyes, pulling herself together with the last shred of dignity she had. She had to go back in there, sign the papers, and let him win. Her grandfather had been right. It was a bitter, poisoned pill to swallow. She pushed off the wall. Her phone, a 5-year-old model with a cracked screen, buzzed in her purse. It was an unknown number, a New York area code. Probably a robocall. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Persistent. With a sigh, she answered, her voice hoarse. "Hello?" A deep, formal voice on the other end said, "Am I speaking to Ms. Josephine Scott, formerly Ms. Josephine Hawthorne?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Who is this?" "My name is Arthur Langley. I am lead counsel for the Hawthorne estate. I've been trying to reach you for 10 days, Miss Hawthorne. I'm afraid I have some news." Josephine's breath hitched. The entire hallway seemed to tilt. "The Hawthorne estate? I was disowned. My grandfather." "Yes." Mr. Langley's voice was grave, yet precise. "Augustus Hawthorne passed away 10 days ago. He was buried in a private ceremony yesterday." A complex wave of emotion washed over Josephine. Grief, sharp and unexpected, for the man who had raised her and rejected her. And confusion. I'm sorry to hear that. But why are you calling me? I was written out. He made that very clear." "He did," Langley affirmed. "For the last 10 years, the sole beneficiary of the Hawthorne will has been a distant cousin, Mr. Geoffrey Vance." "Wait, Vance is on the banned list. Let's change him to Geoffrey Holt." "A man your grandfather thoroughly despised." "Then why?" "Because your grandfather was a complicated man, Miss Hawthorne, and a very patient one. 6 months ago, he executed a new will. A final one. It was unconventional." Josephine could hear the rustle of heavy, expensive paper over the phone. "This new will," Langley continued, "overrides all previous instructions. It begins with a personal note. To my granddaughter Josephine, I told you he was a parasite. I see by the public records that you are finally learning that lesson. I am dead, so I will refrain from saying I told you so. More than this once." Josephine let out a choked laugh that was half a sob. That was him. That was Augustus. The will states, Langley's voice became even more formal, that you, Josephine Hawthorne, are reinstated as the sole and complete beneficiary of the entire Hawthorne global conglomerate, its subsidiaries, its real estate holdings, and all liquid assets, valued at approximately $8.7 billion. Josephine's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, clutching the phone. What? No, that can't be. It is, Miss Hawthorne. But there is a condition. A very strict, non-negotiable condition. A condition, she whispered, her heart pounding. Of course. You are to inherit everything, Langley said, emphasizing each word, on the explicit condition that your marriage to Mr. Brendan Scott is legally and permanently dissolved within 30 days of the reading of this will. The reading was 10 days ago. You have 20 days left. The air left her lungs. He knew? He knew Brendan was... Your grandfather was aware Mr. Scott had filed for divorce, Langley said dryly. Hawthorne Global has extensive resources. Augustus saw this as your final test. If you chose to reconcile with Mr. Scott, the entire estate would default to Mr. Holt. If you finalized the divorce, you would become one of the wealthiest women in the world. Brendan. Smug, arrogant Brendan. He thought he was discarding her. He had no idea that by filing for divorce, he had just handed her a kingdom. Augustus had played the longest game of all, and he had just won. Miss Hawthorne, are you still there? I am, she said, her voice shaking, but a new, cold strength entering it. I'm in court, right now. We're in recess. His lawyer is trying to make me pay him spousal support. A heavy sigh came from Langley's end. Unacceptable. This complicates things. No, perhaps it simplifies them. You cannot sign anything. Do you understand? Do not agree to any terms. My lawyer, he's in over his head. They're going to walk all over us. Mr. Gable? Yes, we are aware of him. He is a good man, but he brought a memo to a gunfight. That is why I am not calling alone. What do you mean? A representative from our coordinating legal team is already on site. She should be arriving at Courtroom 3B momentarily. Her name is Lena Petrova, from the firm of Whitman, Price and Gable. Wait, Gable is the legal aid lawyer. Let's make the firm Whitman, Price and Lowell. She is, to put it mildly, the best. Do not speak. Do not sign. Let Ms. Petrova handle everything. Lena Petrova, Josephine repeated. Go back into that courtroom, Miss Hawthorne, Langley commanded, his voice now filled with the old, familiar authority of her grandfather. And remember who you are. The line clicked dead. Josephine stood up. She was no longer shaking. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the vending machine. The cheap dress, the chapped hands, the tired eyes. They were a costume, a role she had been playing for 10 years. Brendan's laughter echoed in her memory. You're not exactly prime material anymore. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. You have no idea, she whispered. She pushed open the doors to Courtroom 3B, just as Judge Graves was re-entering. Brendan and Kensing were already at their table, looking annoyed. Well, Mrs. Scott, the judge said, have you come to a decision? Josephine met Brendan's smug gaze. Not yet, Your Honor. Kensing scoffed. Your Honor, this is a waste of time. She has no assets, no income, and no options. We demand... The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud. Every head turned. A woman stood there. She was tall, dressed in a severely elegant charcoal grey suit. Her dark hair was pulled back into a flawless chignon. She was flanked by 2 associates, a man and a woman, both carrying thick, leather-bound briefcases. The woman walked down the aisle, her heels clicking on the floor with the sound of a ticking clock, an aura of pure, undiluted power radiating from her. She stopped at the defendant's table, placing a sleek, modern briefcase on it. She looked at Mr. Gable, who stared at her, dumbfounded. Then she looked at Josephine. "Mr. Scott," she said, her voice crisp and clear, with a faint Eastern European accent. "I am Lena Petrova. I'll be taking it from here." The courtroom was utterly silent, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Brendan stared, open-mouthed, at the woman who had just hijacked his victory lap. Lawrence Kensing, however, had gone pale. He knew exactly who Lena Petrova was. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was the lawyer, a corporate litigator from Whitman, Price and Lowell, a firm that didn't just represent clients, it represented industries. Her presence in a county divorce court was the legal equivalent of bringing a nuclear aircraft carrier to a fist fight. "Your Honor," Kensing said, scrambling to his feet, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "What is the meaning of this? This is my colleague's hearing. We were in the middle of a settlement discussion." Lena Petrova didn't even look at him. She addressed the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Lena Petrova. I have just filed a substitution of counsel with the clerk. I am now counsel of record for—" She turned, gesturing to Josephine. "Ms. Josephine Hawthorne." Brendan let out a short, barking laugh. "Hawthorne? What, she's so broke she's already reverting to her maiden name? Is that what this is about? You hired some shark to try and—" "Silence, Mr. Scott," Judge Graves snapped, her eyes fixed on Petrova. "Counselor, the name on my docket is Scott." "A temporary affectation, Your Honor," Petrova said smoothly, "which we are here to correct, among other things. My client filed to restore her maiden name an hour ago. The paperwork is on your desk." The clerk hastily handed the judge a new file. Judge Graves' eyebrows shot up. "I don't understand," Brendan sputtered, looking at Josephine. "What is this? Josie, what did you do? You can't afford her. Her shoes cost more than your car. Did you take out another loan?" Josephine looked at him. For the first time in a decade, she felt no fear, no shame, just a vast, cold distance. She said nothing. "Your Honor," Petrova said, her voice cutting through Brendan's blustering. "My client's former counsel, Mr. Gable, was operating with incomplete information. And Mr. Kensing has been operating on a foundation of deliberate misrepresentation, and we will prove fraud." "Fraud," Kensing yelped. "Now see here, my client's financial disclosures are immaculate. You have provided, Petrova interrupted, "a fiction, a carefully constructed narrative designed to paint my client as a failed, destitute woman, while Mr. Scott paints himself as a long-suffering provider." "He is," Kensing shot back. "He's a senior analyst at mid-tier capital. He earns $94,000 a year, Your Honor," Petrova said, not even glancing at her notes. "A position he secured 6 months ago, using a forged MBA diploma from the University of Pennsylvania. A fact their compliance department, upon our inquiry this morning, found very interesting. I believe Mr. Scott's employment has already been terminated, effective immediately." The color drained from Brendan's face. You're lying." You can't." He fumbled for his phone. "Furthermore," Petrova continued, "the claim that he generously supported his wife's business is demonstrably false. We have bank records showing a systematic siphoning of funds from Josie's bake shop business account to 3 offshore sports betting accounts in Mr. Scott's name, totaling $112,000 over 2 years. He didn't just support the business, he intentionally bankrupted it." Mr. Gable was staring, his mouth a perfect O. Kensing looked like he'd been punched. This is slander. We will sue, Kensing threatened, but his voice was weak. You are welcome to try, Petrova said, a flicker of a smile playing on her lips. But that is not why we are here today. We are here to finalize this divorce, and to do that, we must address the matter of assets. My client has already made a generous offer. Your client's offer, Petrova said, her voice dropping, is based on the assumption that Ms. Hawthorne is, to quote Mr. Scott from 10 minutes ago, delusional and has nothing. Brendan, who had been frantically scrolling through his phone, looked up, his eyes wide with panic. He had just seen the email from HR. This is all well and good, Counselor, Judge Graves said, her patience wearing thin. But Mr. Kensing is right about one thing. Ms. Hawthorne's financial disclosures show, well, very little. A defunct business, $27 in a checking account. Your allegations against Mr. Scott are serious, but they don't change her financial reality. That, Your Honor, Petrova said, is where you are mistaken. Her financial reality has materially changed. She nodded to one of her associates, who stepped forward and handed a new, very thick, leather-bound document to the bailiff, who in turn passed it to Judge Graves. What is that? Kensing demanded. We have not been served with that. I object. You can't introduce new evidence in the middle of a hearing. It's not evidence for the marital dispute, Your Honor, Petrova said. It is a legal declaration, a simple update of my client's financial standing as required by the court. Judge Graves opened the binder. She read the first page. Her eyes widened. She read it again, then slowly, deliberately, took off her glasses. She looked at Kensing. She looked at Brendan. And then she looked at Josephine, but with a new, profound respect. Mr. Kensing, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. I suggest you take a look at this. She passed the document to the bailiff. Kensing snatched it. He began to read, his face a mask of confusion. Brendan, impatient and terrified, read over his shoulder. What is it? Brendan hissed. Another bakery debt? Kensing didn't answer. His hands had begun to shake. He read the summary page, his finger tracing the words. Last will and testament of Augustus Hawthorne. Beneficiary, Josephine Hawthorne. Asset summary. Controlling interest, 81%, in Hawthorne Global Conglomerate. Real estate holdings, New York, London, Zurich, Hong Kong. Liquid assets, bonds and securities. Brendan's eyes scanned down to the final number at the bottom of the page, a number with 2 commas and a lot of zeros. Total estimated value, $700,000. Brendan Scott stared at the number. He blinked. He read it again. $8.7 billion. It was impossible. A misprint. A grotesque, cruel joke. This is fake, he yelled, his voice cracking, echoing in the stunned courtroom. It's forged. This is that fraud you were talking about. He wheeled on Josephine, his face a mottled purple. Josie, what is this? Tell them it's a lie. Your grandfather hated you. He disowned you. He threw you out. He told me himself you'd never see a dime. Josephine, who had been silent for so long, finally looked at him. The woman he saw was not the beaten-down wife from 20 minutes ago. It was someone else, someone tall and cold and entirely, terrifyingly unfamiliar. He did, she said, her voice clear and carrying. He disowned me because I chose you. So this is a lie, Brendan screamed. He died 10 days ago, Brendan, Josephine said, her voice cutting through his hysteria. And it turns out he hated you far more than he ever hated me. He just had to wait for me to see it too. The air was sucked out of Brendan's lungs. Kensing, meanwhile, was frantically reading the fine print of the will's executive summary. He wasn't a corporate lawyer, but he wasn't stupid. He saw the dates, the date of death, the date of the will's execution, and then he saw the condition. His head snapped up, a new, desperate kind of hope in his eyes. "Your Honor," he said, This changes things, yes, but it changes them in our favor." Brendan looked at his lawyer, confused. "What?" "Your Honor," Kensing said, his confidence surging back. "This is a massive, massive development. This inheritance, Miss Hawthorne received it during the marriage. The divorce is not yet final. The will was read 10 days ago. The marriage is, as of this second, still legally intact." He pointed a triumphant finger at Josephine. "Under the laws of this state, any assets, inheritance, or windfall acquired by either party prior to the final dissolution of the marriage is considered marital property." Brendan's face, which had been a mask of terror, suddenly lit up with a grotesque, greedy understanding. "Marital property? Your Honor," Kensing was almost giddy. We withdraw our previous petition. We are amending it. We are seeking 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, including this $8.7 billion inheritance. My client is entitled to $4 billion. Brendan was hyperventilating, his eyes wide and manic. $4 billion. He looked at Josephine, his expression shifting from rage to something that almost looked like love, but was just raw, uncut avarice. "Josie, baby, we don't have to do this. We can fix this. We can—" "Mr. Scott," Judge Graves interrupted, her face grim. Are you serious? You were just demanding spousal support from this woman who you claimed was destitute." "We were misinformed," Kensing shouted. "But the law is the law. She is a billionaire, and my client, as her husband, is entitled to his share." The courtroom vibrated with the audacity of the claim. Mr. Gable in the back row just shook his head in disbelief. Brendan, now fully embracing his new reality, stepped forward. "That's right. I supported her. I was with her when she had nothing. I deserve this." Lena Petrova, who had been watching this entire display with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a frantic, dying insect, finally stepped forward. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and absolute, "Mr. Kensing is, for the second time today, fundamentally incorrect, though I must congratulate him on the sheer audacity of his argument." "It's the law, Petrova," Kensing snarled. "You can't change it." "I don't have to," Petrova said. "I simply have to read." Mr. Kensing, in his excitement, clearly failed to read Article 4, Section 2 of the will. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, Mr. Kensing is correct that the inheritance is an inchoate interest, not yet fully vested, but he is fatally wrong about why. He believes it vested 10 days ago. It did not." She turned, her gaze falling on Brendan, who was still calculating his billions. The will of Augustus Hawthorne is what is known as a conditional bequest. The inheritance, the full $8.7 billion, does not vest with my client upon the reading of the will. It does not vest upon his death. She paused, letting the silence hang. It vests, specifically and irrevocably, only upon the legal dissolution of her marriage to Mr. Brendan Scott. The meaning of her words settled over the courtroom like a shroud. Brendan and Kensing stared blankly. I don't understand," Brendan said, his voice small. Petrova smiled, a thin, sharp, merciless expression. "Let me be clearer for you, Mr. Scott. You see, Mr. Kensing, if my client had already inherited the money, You would be correct. It would be marital property. Augustus Hawthorne was a very smart man. He knew that. He knew you. She pointed a long, elegant finger at Brendan. This inheritance does not exist yet. As of this moment, my client has nothing. She is just as broke as you claimed she was. The money, all those billions, are sitting in an escrow account, controlled by the Hawthorne estate. She turned back to the judge. The will is explicit, Your Honour. The funds are to be transferred to Ms. Hawthorne's name at the moment, and not 1 second before a certified, final and non-appealable decree of divorce is signed by a presiding judge. The realization hit Kensing like a physical blow. He staggered back, grabbing the table for support. "No," he whispered. "No, that's legal torture. That can't be." "It is," Petrova said, "and it is brilliant." She faced Brendan again, her voice a model of false sympathy. "Do you see now, Mr. Scott? If you stay married to her, she gets nothing. The entire fortune goes to Geoffrey Holt. She remains the failed baker you so eloquently described. If you divorce her, she becomes a billionaire, and you, as her ex-husband, get exactly nothing, because the money never existed during the marriage." Petrova clasped her hands in front of her. "Your grandfather, Ms. Hawthorne, has created a perfect paradox. Mr. Scott's own greed is the very thing that disqualifies him from the reward. He is not divorcing a billionaire. By demanding this divorce, he is creating one. Checkmate." Brendan Scott's mind simply snapped. The vision of the $4 billion, so real he could taste it, evaporated. It was replaced by the image of Josephine, the woman he had just mocked and humiliated, ascending to a throne he could never, ever touch. "No," he roared, a primal, animalistic sound. "No, I won't do it. I won't sign. I withdraw the petition." Kensing's eyes widened in horror. "Brendan, no, don't. I take it back." Brendan scrambled towards the judge's bench. "We're not getting divorced. I love her. I love my wife. We're reconciling." He turned to Josephine, his eyes bulging, tears of pure, desperate greed streaming down his face. "Josie, baby, please, we can fix this. We can fix it." "It was all a mistake. I'll go to therapy. I'll pay back the bakery. I love you. Don't let them do this." Josephine looked at the pathetic, grasping creature groveling before her. The man who, an hour ago, had called her delusional and demanded she pay him for the privilege of being discarded. She stood, her posture erect, regal. A Hawthorne. "Your Honour," she said, her voice ringing with an icy finality. "Mr. Scott filed his petition for divorce 6 months ago, citing irreconcilable differences. I agree. The differences are irreconcilable." "No!" Brendan shrieked. "You can't. It's my petition. I take it back." "It's too late for that, Mr. Scott," Judge Graves said, her voice filled with contempt. "You filed. Your wife has now accepted. This court does not tolerate such flagrant, disgusting manipulation." But she'll be a billionaire," he wept. "And I'll have nothing. It's not fair." "You just had to be a decent human being, Brendan," Josephine said, her voice soft but cutting. "That was the only test, and you failed." You bitch!" he screamed, his face contorted. He lunged, not at Josephine, but at the table, trying to rip the will in half, as if destroying the paper would destroy the truth. "It's mine! It's mine!" The courtroom doors burst open, and 2 large bailiffs, summoned by the clerk, tackled Brendan before he could take 2 steps. He thrashed on the floor, screaming and sobbing, a complete and total breakdown. "Take him out," Judge Graves ordered, her face a mask of disgust. Take him to a holding cell until he is calm." As they dragged Brendan Scott out of the courtroom, he was still screaming, "It's my money! It's half mine! I'm a billionaire! Tell them, Josie, tell them!" The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off the sound, leaving a ringing silence in his wake. Lawrence Kensing, alone, ashen-faced, slowly began to pack his briefcase. His career was over. Judge Graves looked at Josephine, who stood, poised and calm, amidst the wreckage of her former life. "Ms. Hawthorne," the judge said. She picked up her pen. "Congratulations. Please present me with the final decree. I am signing it. Effective immediately." Lena Petrova, as if she were a magician pulling a dove from her sleeve, produced the final, prepared divorce decree from her briefcase. She hadn't come to argue. She had come to execute. "We anticipated a favorable outcome, Your Honor. We have the final decree ready for your signature." Judge Graves took the document. The entire courtroom was so quiet that the rustle of the thick, expensive paper seemed to echo. She looked, not at the document, but at Josephine, and for the first time, her severe expression softened into something approaching profound respect. This was not a victim. This was a survivor. Then she picked up her pen. The scratch of the nib on the paper was the only sound. It was the sound of a 10-year nightmare ending. The sound of a billion-dollar lock turning. "The marriage between Josephine Hawthorne and Brendan Scott is hereby dissolved," Judge Graves declared, her voice resonating with finality. She signed her name with a firm, deliberate stroke. "The petitioner's claims for spousal support and division of assets are denied, with prejudice." That final, legal term hung in the air. With prejudice. It meant he could never, ever try this again. The court grants the defendant's motion to restore her maiden name, effective immediately. The judge looked at Petrova. "I trust your client will also be pursuing the criminal charges regarding Mr. Scott's fraud, forgery, and perjury." "We are, Your Honor," Petrova confirmed, her voice chillingly neutral. "My colleagues at the district attorney's office are already very interested, as is the compliance department at Mid-Tier Capital and the Internal Revenue Service. Mr. Scott is going to be a very, very busy man." Lawrence Kensing, who had been frozen in place, a living statue of ruin, finally moved. He didn't make a sound, didn't look at his client, didn't look at the judge. He just snapped his briefcase shut, the sound of a career and a massive payday ending, and walked silently out of the courtroom, a ghost evaporating in the light. Judge Graves looked at the empty space where he had been, then at Josephine. She nodded once. "Court is adjourned." The gavel struck the wood. The sound was not an ending, it was a starting gun. Josephine stood, her legs feeling stronger than they had in a decade. The weight of Josie Scott, the shame, the failure, the fear, it all just evaporated. "Miss Hawthorne," Lena Petrova said, the name sounding perfect and correct for the first time. She gestured to the door. Josephine walked out of courtroom 3B, leaving the wreckage of her old life behind. The hallway was cool and marbled, and she took her first breath as a free woman. It was clean and cold. Mr. Gable was waiting by the elevators, his expression a frantic mix of awe, confusion, and shell shock. He looked like a man who had just seen a quiet kitten suddenly turn into a panther and win a war. Miss Hawthorne?" he stammered as she approached. I don't know what to say. I've never... In 20 years..." Josephine stopped, giving him a small, genuine smile. "You were the only person who believed me when I had nothing, Mr. Gable. You were willing to stand up for me. That is something I will never forget." She took a business card from Petrova, who had it ready. This is the direct line for Arthur Langley, my grandfather's chief counsel. Please send your final invoice to his office. They will, of course, be paying your full rate, not the legal aid scale." Gable stared at the card, which felt like solid gold in his hand. Thank you, but I didn't do anything." "You did enough," Josephine said. She paused. This was her first act. "And one more thing. I am endowing a new legal fund for your office, starting tomorrow. We'll call it the Second Chance Fund. It's for the next person who walks in your door, the one you know is telling the truth but doesn't have the resources to fight. Now they will." Tears welled in the young lawyer's eyes. He could only nod, speechless. "Thank you, Miss Hawthorne. God, thank you." Josephine nodded, then turned and walked with Petrova toward the main courthouse steps. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the muted quiet of the hall was shattered. A wall of noise, a chaotic sea of flashing lights and shouting, hit them. "Miss Hawthorne, is it true? $8 billion. What happened in there? Are you the new head of Hawthorne Global?" A phalanx of news reporters and photographers, alerted by a discreet call from Petrova's press associate, swarmed them, microphones and cameras shoved in their faces. Josephine flinched, a ghost of her old self reacting, but Petrova was a rock beside her. "This is the new reality, Miss Hawthorne. You'll get used to it." And then, as if on cue, the chaos parted. A car, a long, gleaming, impossibly black Bentley Mulsanne, pulled silently to the curb. It didn't look like a car. It looked like a piece of polished obsidian, a statement of quiet, absolute wealth. The driver, in a crisp uniform, emerged and opened the rear door. A man Josephine hadn't seen in 10 years stepped out. It was Arthur Langley, her grandfather's lawyer, his face etched with a respectful, knowing smile. He looked at her, not as a long-lost girl, but as his new employer. He bowed his head, a slight, formal gesture. "Ms. Hawthorne, it is a profound pleasure to see you again. Welcome back. The jet is waiting." Welcome back. The word settled over her, a mantle of power. But just as she moved toward the car, a side door of the courthouse was shoved open. A commotion. 2 large bailiffs, dragging a thrashing, broken figure between them. It was Brendan. He was in handcuffs. His $4,000 Italian suit was ripped at the shoulder. His expensive silk tie was gone, and his face was a grotesque, contorted mask of tears, sweat, and rage. He saw her. He saw the cameras, the reporters, the Bentley, the poised woman in the simple dress who was the center of it all. He saw the $8 billion he had held in his hand for one glorious, insane second, now vanishing forever. The reality of his loss hit him like a physical blow. "Josie!" he roared, a raw, animal sound of pure agony. He lunged, but the officers held him fast. "Josie, please, don't let them do this. It was a mistake. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry." Josephine paused. Her foot was halfway to the car. The entire street went silent, save for the click of cameras. She turned, slowly. He was weeping, a broken, pathetic creature. "Josie, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "I have nothing. They took my job. My accounts are frozen. I have nothing. Please, you have everything. Don't let me go to jail. I'm sorry. I love you. I've always loved you." Josephine took a slow step back onto the pavement, the crowd parting around her. She looked at the man who had laughed at her, the man who had called her delusional, the man who had, an hour ago, tried to take the last crumbs from her table. She looked at him, weeping on the filthy courthouse steps. "You're right," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was not loud. It was cold, clear, and carried over the entire silent street. "I do have everything." She looked at his ruined, weeping face. "The name," she said, "is Miss Hawthorne." It was not a correction. It was an execution. Brendan's face collapsed, the last, frantic flicker of hope dying in his eyes, replaced by the hollow understanding of his own destruction. Josephine held his gaze for 1 second longer, then turned away, her back straight and rigid. She started to get into the car. She paused one last time, turning her head slightly, but not to look at him. She looked at Lena Petrova. "Ms. Petrova," she said, her voice casual, as if discussing the weather. "Mr. Kensing seems to have left in a hurry. Please have your office send Mr. Scott's dry cleaning bill to my new accounting department." She gestured with her chin at the sobbing man on the ground. "He appears to have soiled his suit." A few reporters, the ones close enough to hear, gasped. One let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Lena Petrova, for the first time that day, allowed herself a full, genuine, and utterly lethal smile. "Of course, Miss Hawthorne." Josephine Hawthorne slid into the plush, silent leather interior of the Bentley. The driver closed the door. The sound was a solid, heavy, expensive thunk. Inside, the roar of the press and the sound of Brendan's wailing were instantly cut off. It was utterly silent. As the car pulled smoothly and silently away from the curb, she did not look back. She did not see the officers haul Brendan, a ruined and forgotten man, to his feet and drag him toward a waiting police car. She was already looking forward, through the tinted glass, at the city skyline. Her city. 1 year later. The 80th floor office was not a room, it was a statement. The air was silent, pressurized and clean. 3 of the 4 walls were seamless, floor-to-ceiling glass, framing a godlike, panoramic view of Manhattan. The sun, setting over the Hudson, cast long, golden-red shadows across the black obsidian table at the room's center. The stale, bitter coffee of Courtroom 3B felt like a memory from another, lesser lifetime. Josephine Hawthorne sat at the head of that table. She was no longer the woman in the discount dress, her hands chapped from flour and lye. That woman was a ghost. In her place sat a leader, dressed in a sharp, dark blue Armani power suit, her hair cut into a sleek, professional bob that framed a face that had been reforged. She was no longer soft. She was poised, her gaze direct and assessing. She was, in every way, the master of this room and the empire it represented. The board of directors for the DuPont Chemical Division has been dissolved, she stated, her voice calm and carrying, never needing to be raised. Their R&D is to be fully integrated by the end of the quarter. I want a full report on their green energy patents by Monday. Their legacy research is archaic. I want our future, and theirs, to be in renewables. Next. A man to her left, Arthur Langley, no longer just the estate's lawyer, but her chief counsel and closest advisor, spoke up. "Ms. Hawthorne, the hostile takeover attempt by the Lefebvre family's hedge fund has been neutralized. A few of the 12 board members, most of them holdovers from her grandfather's era, men who had at first seen her as a temporary curiosity, shifted in their seats. The Lefebvre fight had been a brutal, 6-month proxy war. The French banking family had assumed she was a soft-touch heiress, a baker who had stumbled into a fortune. They had, to their immense and public regret, found out otherwise. Neutralized, Josephine said, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. I believe eviscerated was the word the journal used. Langley permitted himself a thin smile. Your counteroffer bought out their majority partner in a single afternoon. They are in full retreat and have signaled a willingness to sell their remaining shares. To us. Good, Josephine said. Have my assistant, Paige, send a basket of muffins to the Lefebvre offices. The board, once so severe, chuckled. This was the move that had solidified her legend among them. She was her grandfather's blood, but with a theatricality he had always lacked. "Make them blueberry," she continued, "and make sure the card is very clear. From Josie's Bake Shop." Her old bakery was now a fully funded, thriving subsidiary. A passion project that cleared 6 figures a month, not because it needed to, but because the story was good and the product was even better. It was her one sweet indulgence, a reminder of where she had been and a weapon in her new arsenal. As the laughter subsided, Paige, her sharp, impeccably dressed executive assistant, approached silently. She moved with an efficiency that Josephine respected, placing a sleek tablet in front of her. On the screen was a breaking news alert from the Wall Street Journal. Brendan Scott sentenced to 36 months in federal prison for wire fraud, perjury, and forgery. The room went silent. The board members looked down, giving her the space to process. Josephine read the headline. She looked at the grainy courthouse photo of Brendan, his face a mottled, weeping mask, so different from the smug, handsome man who had laughed at her. She searched for any emotion, a spark of triumph, a flicker of pity, a lingering trace of anger. She found nothing. He was a ghost, a name from a closed file, a footnote in the story of her life that was now entirely, irrevocably her own. The man who had once been her entire world now occupied less emotional space than a bad quarterly report. She had not just won. She had healed. The wound had not just scarred over. The skin was new. He was a problem that had been solved, first by Lena Petrova, then by the Southern District of New York. He was, in the end, just a parasite who had, by trying to kill his host, inadvertently forced her to evolve into something he couldn't even comprehend. With a simple, dismissive flick of her finger, she swiped the notification away, bringing up her next agenda item. She looked up, and the board visibly relaxed. She was unfazed. She was in control. "Now," she said, her voice turning from the cold steel of business to the tempered warmth of purpose. "The foundation." She stood, walking to the glass wall, looking out at the sprawling city, the millions of lights just beginning to twinkle against the twilight. The first Josephine Hawthorne shelter for spousal abuse survivors opens today in Brooklyn, she announced to the room. Its endowment is permanent. It will provide free, world-class legal counsel from the best firms, including, of course, Whitman, Price, and Lowell, to any man or woman trapped in a financially abusive relationship. It will provide job training, housing, and a path to independence. She turned back to the board, her eyes holding the same fire that had neutralized the Lefebvre family. "My grandfather, he built an empire, but he did it with a hammer, and he saw every problem as a nail. He left me the hammer, but he also left me a unique perspective." She walked back to her seat, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "There will be no more Josie Scotts left to the mercy of men like Brendan. Not on my watch. This foundation will be the first of 50. We will build a network so strong that the next woman in that courtroom, the one with the discount shoes and the $27 in her account, will have the full power of Hawthorne Global at her back." The board members didn't clap. They nodded. This was not a charity case. It was a mission. They were her grandfather's men, but they were her soldiers now. She looked at the faces around the table, the old guard who now saw her as the future. She had finally understood her grandfather's last, greatest lesson. The money was never the end. It was the means. He had given her the ultimate tool of retribution, not just to destroy her past, but to build a new future for thousands. She was her grandfather's blood, but she was her own woman. She was his strength, tempered with her own hard-won compassion. She was, in every sense of the word, his true legacy. Josephine Hawthorne sat down, placing her hands on the cool, black obsidian. She pulled her laptop toward her and closed it with a quiet, final click. Meeting adjourned. The gavel fell, and in that instant, a life of humiliation ended, and an empire was born. Josephine Hawthorne walked out of that courtroom, leaving the ashes of her past behind, a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate is often the one holding all the cards. Her story wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming a legacy, about the ultimate karmic justice, and about transforming pain into unbelievable power. What did you think of Brendan's downfall? Was it justice, or was it mercy he didn't deserve? Let us know in the comments below. If you loved this story of triumph and righteous revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see a comeback, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories just like this one. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. The man you loved, the one you built a life with, leaves you for a flashier, newer model. He calls your life small. His new wife calls you poor. She laughs at your simple clothes and your quiet job, plastering her new, lavish life all over social media for you to see. She doesn't know the designer bag on her arm is a cheap replica, and she doesn't know the small coffee shop you run is a hobby. She has no idea that you, the poor ex-wife, are the one who signs the paychecks of the people she's trying to impress. And that your family name, the Prescott name, can end her entire world with a single phone call. Sophie's life was measured in the scent of roasted coffee beans and the quiet crackle of old book bindings. Her cafe, the Page and Bean, was her sanctuary. It was a small, brick-walled haven on a quiet street, smelling of lavender, vanilla, and paper. It was not a successful business by the world's standards. It didn't franchise, it didn't aggressively market, it didn't even have a TikTok presence. It just was. And for Sophie, it was enough. It was real. This quiet, unassuming life was the one Gregory had walked away from. Gregory, her husband of 5 years, the man she had met in a library, who had quoted poetry and promised a life of shared dreams. That life had soured. Gregory was ambitious, and Sophie was content. His ambition began to see her contentment as a liability, a boat anchor. He wanted the corner office, the German car, the glass-walled penthouse. Sophie just wanted a good book, a kind conversation, and a perfect espresso. "You're not ambitious, Sophie," he had said, the words hanging in the air of their small, rented apartment, already half-emptied of his belongings. "You're static. I'm moving forward. I need someone who is moving with me." He had moved forward. All right. He'd moved on with Brenda. Brenda was not static. Brenda was a whirlwind of spray tans, acrylic nails, and loud performative laughter. She was a lifestyle influencer, which seemed to mean she photographed herself with products she was given for free, or, more often, bought and returned. She was everything Sophie was not, loud, demanding, and utterly obsessed with the appearance of wealth. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, the bell above the cafe's oak door jingled. Sophie looked up from polishing the espresso machine, a soft smile ready for a customer. The smile froze. It was Gregory. He looked different. His suit was shinier, his hair slicked back with too much product. He looked thinner and a decade older, and beside him, clinging to his arm, was Brenda. Brenda was a sensory assault. Her perfume, sharp and cloyingly sweet, preceded her. She was wearing a skin-tight dress, patterned with a garish gold logo, sunglasses on her head despite the cloudy day, and a large, bright red bag that screamed its brand name from across the room. "Oh," Gregory said, his voice strained. He had clearly not intended to come here. Brenda, however, scanned the small, cozy shop with a look of disdainful curiosity. "This is it? This is where you used to hang out?" Her voice was a high-pitched drawl. She pulled Gregory toward the counter, not having recognized Sophie yet, who was partially hidden by the gleaming machine. "Gregory, baby, this place is dead," Brenda whispered, loud enough for the 3 other patrons to hear. "It's so quaint, and a little dusty." "Brenda, shut up," Gregory hissed, his face flushing red as he saw Sophie step fully into view. "Sophie," he managed, his voice cracking. Brenda's perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. Her eyes, wide and assessing, raked Sophie up and down. Sophie was wearing her usual uniform: comfortable jeans, a soft cashmere sweater in a modest shade of beige, and her hair pulled back in a simple, elegant bun. To Brenda, she looked like a librarian or a nanny. Wait. Brenda's painted red mouth formed a perfect O. "This is her? This is Sophie?" She let out a peal of laughter. "Oh, honey. Greg, you never told me." "Told you what?" Gregory asked, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "That she... you know." Brenda waved a hand, jangling a dozen gold-plated bracelets. "That she's the... help." "I'm the owner, actually," Sophie said, her voice quiet but clear. It cut through Brenda's perfume. "Welcome to the Page and Bean. What can I get for you?" Brenda's smile turned into a sneer. She had just realized the power dynamic she was walking into. She was the new, improved wife. This was the old, discarded model. This was her stage. "Oh, sweetheart," Brenda cooed, leaning on the counter. "You own this little place. Good for you. Keeping busy. It's so important to have a hobby." She looked at Gregory, squeezing his arm. "My Greg is so busy, he doesn't have time for hobbies. He's all about his career. He just got a massive promotion at the firm. We're celebrating. Hence," she patted the red bag, "a little gift. From me to me." Sophie knew for a fact Gregory hadn't gotten a promotion. She knew this because her family, well, her family's firm, was the one that owned the company Gregory worked for. He was a mid-level analyst, and his quarterly review, which had crossed a desk she was familiar with, had not been massive promotion material. It had been adequate. "That's nice, Brenda," Sophie said, wiping down the counter. "Congratulations, Gregory." Gregory just nodded, his eyes fixed on the pastry case. "I'll have a... Brenda scanned the simple, elegant menu. "Don't you have anything fun, like a frappe with whipped cream and sprinkles?" "I have a cold brewed coffee," Sophie offered. "Or a cappuccino. I use single origin beans from Guatemala." Brenda wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, no, just fine. I'll take a large iced latte, skim milk, and 4 pumps of vanilla, and make sure it's actually sweet." She tapped her credit card on the counter. "And I guess get something for... what's her name?" The question was directed at Sophie, but she was gesturing to her one employee, Maria, who was reading in the corner, trying to be invisible. "I'm fine, thank you," Maria said, not looking up. "Whatever. Just mine, then." Brenda turned to Gregory. "Baby, go find us a table." "Not that one," she said, pointing to a cozy armchair. "It looks like someone's grandma died in it." Gregory, his face a mask of pained obedience, went to a small, hard table by the window. Sophie made the drink. She made it perfectly, just as she made all her drinks. She handed the cloyingly sweet, vanilla-scented concoction to Brenda. "That'll be $6.50, Sophie said. Brenda laughed. $6.50 for this? God, no wonder you're... Well, you know. She tapped her card, the payment approved instantly. She took a sip and made a face. It's fine. She sauntered over to Gregory, but before she sat, she turned back to Sophie. Hey, it was so good to finally meet you. I see now why Greg wanted something. More. It's not your fault. Some people are just small town, and some of us are built for the big city. She winked, then sat down, immediately pulling out her phone to take a selfie, tagging the location with a sarcastic comment. My man's ex is just adorable. Ash quaint, little life, just blessed. Sophie watched them. Gregory wouldn't meet her eyes. Brenda was talking animatedly, showing him her phone, oblivious to the fact that she was sitting in a cafe owned by a Prescott. Sophie wasn't just Sophie the barista. She was Sophie Prescott, the sole heiress to the Prescott Consolidated Empire, a logistics and real estate conglomerate worth more than the GDP of a small country, and she, in her simple jeans and cashmere sweater, had just been called poor by a woman drinking a $6.50 latte she couldn't really afford. Sophie turned back to her espresso machine and began to polish, the rhythmic shh-shh-shh of the cloth the only sound of her rising anger. The game had just begun. Brenda, it turned out, was not content with one small victory. She had tasted blood, and she had found a new favorite hobby, tormenting the poor ex-wife. It became a pattern. Every few days Brenda would appear. The next time she brought friends. 2 women who looked exactly like her. Same hair extensions, same logo-covered bags, same air of desperate, brittle superiority. "Girls, this is the place I was telling you about," Brenda announced, her voice echoing in the quiet cafe. "This is his ex-wife's little project. Isn't it cute?" The friends, whose names Sophie would learn were Lexi and Jen, giggled and looked around as if they were in a zoo. "Oh my God, Brenda, it's tiny," Lexi said, picking up a first-edition copy of The Great Gatsby from a shelf and immediately dropping it. "Oops, it's so old. She's so poor," Jen whispered to Brenda, not realizing her voice carried. Sophie, who had paid over $15,000 for that first edition at a Sotheby's auction, winced as she picked it up, checking the spine. "Please be careful with the books. They're for sale, but also for reading." "Who reads paper anymore?" Brenda scoffed. "Anyway, we're on our way to the new VIP lounge at the Belmont Club. Gregory's membership just got approved. We need, I guess 4 coffees, the cheapest ones you have. We'll probably just throw them out anyway." Sophie gritted her teeth. The Belmont Club. Her father, Robert Prescott, sat on the board. Gregory wasn't a member. He was a guest on a 3-time pass that one of his superiors, Mr. Wyatt, had given him, likely out of pity. 4 black coffees, Sophie said, her voice clipped. 12 otros. As they waited, Brenda lounged dramatically against the counter, taking selfies. "Just trying to help a small business? Not charity? Cho pity purchase. No so grateful." Sophie's employee, Maria, emerged from the back, her face thunderous. "Sophie, you don't have to serve them." "It's fine, Maria," Sophie murmured. "They're paying customers." "They're monsters," Maria shot back, loud enough for Brenda to hear. Brenda whirled around. "What did you say, you little Spanish girl?" Maria, who was a 4th-generation Italian-American law student, stepped forward. "I said, you're a monster, and that bag is a bad fake. The G in the logo is too round." Brenda's face went from smug to sheet white to furious red in a split second. The red bag she'd been so proud of. "How dare you!" Brenda shrieked. "This is real. Gregory bought it for me." "Then he got ripped off," Maria said, crossing her arms. Just like Sophie did. "Maria," Sophie said, her voice sharp. "That's enough. Brenda grabbed her coffees, threw a $20 bill on the counter, and stormed out. "Keep the change, you pathetic losers! You'll never see us at the Belmont!" The door slammed. Sophie and Maria stood in the silence. "You shouldn't have done that," Sophie said, her hands shaking. "Why? Because you're too nice?" Maria demanded. "Sophie, she's walking all over you. Why are you letting her? Why are you living like this? This shop. It's a joke for you. I've seen your car. The simple electric car. That's a $200,000 prototype that isn't even on the market yet. The simple sweater. That's Loro Piana. That's my rent for 3 months. Why are you pretending to be this?" Sophie sat down heavily on a stool. "It's complicated, Maria." "It's not," Maria insisted. "You're rich. He's an idiot. And his new girlfriend is a moron. Tell them. Destroy them." "That's not who I am," Sophie said, her voice small. "And it's not who I can be. Not yet." But the attacks didn't stop. They moved online. Brenda, incensed by the fake bag comment, went on a digital rampage. She posted videos to her 2,000 followers. "Hi guys." "So, I just had the weirdest experience. Went to support a local business run by my husband's ex and her staff. So hostile. Just goes to show, being poor really does make you bitter and mean. Sad Shabbitter ex, moving on up." She then posted a screenshot of Gregory's adequate performance review, which he had foolishly left open on his laptop. She had blurred the numbers, but not the title. "Senior analyst. So proud of my man. Killing it, while others are, well, serving coffee. Boss life. Power couple. Winning." But the final, most brutal attack came not at the cafe, but at the place Sophie was most vulnerable, the local farmer's market. Sophie was there, as she was every Sunday, picking out fresh vegetables, her face bright and relaxed. This was her one true, normal pleasure. She was smelling a sprig of rosemary when that voice cut through the crowd. "Well, well, well, look who it is." Brenda was there, filming on her phone. "Still pinching pennies, Sophie? Buying vegetables? God, it's so earthy." Sophie tried to walk away. "Brenda, please, I'm just shopping." "Oh, I am too," Brenda said, holding up a single plastic-wrapped truffle. "Gregory and I are making truffle risotto tonight. He's at the butcher getting a dry-aged tomahawk steak. We're flying to Aspen for a long weekend, you know. He's finally able to live the life he deserves, the life I give him." She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but keeping the phone camera rolling. "You were holding him back, you know that? With your little life, your little shop, your little dreams. He told me. He said being married to you was like living in a grayscale movie. He said he needed color. He needed life." She gestured to her own neon yellow outfit. "I'm that color, Sophie. And you? You're just beige." She turned to the camera. "It's so sad, guys. You should always follow your dreams. Don't let a beige person hold you back. Live in color, Janchars Aspen-bound, then upgraded." She sauntered off, laughing. Sophie stood there, holding the bunch of rosemary. Her hand was shaking. She wasn't angry anymore. She was done. The agreement she'd made with her father, the one that had kept her in this quiet, simple life, had a clause. It was a 5-year term designed to see if her marriage to a commoner would last. But it also had an exit clause. The agreement was null and void upon a legal divorce. The divorce was 6 months ago. For 6 months, Sophie had chosen to remain Sophie the barista, clinging to the last remnants of the life she had tried to build. She had been reluctant to step back into the world of her family, the world of the Prescotts. But Brenda, with her cheap insults and her tacky fake bag, had just made the decision for her. "Beige," Sophie whispered to herself, a cold, hard smile touching her lips. All right, Brenda. Let's see how you like. Full color. She pulled out her phone. She didn't call her father. She didn't call her lawyer. She scrolled to a name she hadn't contacted in almost a year. She typed a simple text. Andre. I need a dress. Something for the Prescott Foundation Gala. And make it red. While Brenda was busy projecting an empire, Gregory was living in its ruins. The life Brenda called color was, in reality, a suffocating, blinding shade of red. Ink. Gregory was drowning. Brenda's little gift to herself, the red bag, which he had thought was real, had been charged to a credit card that was already screaming in agony. The massive promotion was a lie she'd invented, one he was now terrified his bosses would hear about. He had received a 2% cost of living raise and an email from HR about his adequate performance. He sat in his grey cubicle, staring at the blurred photo Brenda had posted. Senior analyst. It felt like a joke. He was a senior analyst. He had been for 4 years. He wasn't moving up. He was stuck. He had left Sophie because her contentment felt like a judgment on his ambition. But now, he was starting to realize that her contentment hadn't been apathy. It had been peace. A peace he hadn't felt since he'd signed the lease on a new, overpriced condo with Brenda. Hey, Greg. Gregory jumped. His colleague Ben was leaning over the cubicle wall. Ben was a quiet, no-nonsense numbers guy, one of the few people in the office Gregory actually respected. Hey, Ben, what's up? Ben gestured to Gregory's screen, where a credit card statement was mostly obscured. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. Yeah, fine, Gregory muttered, quickly closing the window. Just, end of quarter stress. Ben didn't look convinced. Listen, I saw your wife's, posts about the promotion. Gregory's blood ran cold. Oh, that. She gets excited. You know how it is. No, I don't, Ben said, his voice dropping. And I'm guessing Mr. Wyatt doesn't either. He's not big on hype. Especially when the numbers don't back it up. You know this is a Prescott-owned company, right? They're all about subtlety, understated performance. You're not being very subtle. Mr. Wyatt, the division head, a man who dressed in $1,000 suits that looked like they cost $100, and who seemed to know everything. He was old school. He was terrified of Mr. Wyatt. She's just proud, Gregory said, weakly. She's a liability, Ben said, bluntly. And that trip to Aspen? You're taking on new clients. Gregory's stomach twisted. The Aspen trip was 2 nights in a cut-rate ski lodge, paid for on a card that was now 110% over its limit. It's a networking opportunity. Right, Ben sighed. Look, Greg, we've been in the trenches for a while. I'm telling you this as a friend. You're spending like a VP, but you're still an analyst. It doesn't end well. This company, the people at the top, they see everything. They see the debt. They see the showboating. It's not the path to the corner office. It's the path to the exit door. Ben walked away, leaving Gregory in the sterile, fluorescent silence. He was a fraud, and he was terrified. That night, the terror curdled into resentment. He walked into the condo. Brenda was on the couch, wrapped in a white robe, a green mask on her face, filming herself. And then I told her, she was saying to her phone, that she was beige, and guys, she just stood there. It was so sad. But you have to cut toxic, poor-minded people out of your... Brenda, turn that off. Brenda jumped, her phone fumbling. Greg, baby, you're home. Did you get the steaks? Did you see my post? It got like 200 likes. I saw it, Gregory said, his voice flat. He threw his keys on the counter. "You have to take it down." Brenda's mask crinkled as she frowned. "What? Why? It's true." "It's not true," Gregory snapped, his voice finally rising. "It's not true, Brenda. There is no promotion. There is no killing it. I am drowning. This condo, your bags, the non-stop parties. We can't afford any of it." Brenda stood up, ripping the phone off its tripod. "What are you talking about? Afford? You're a senior analyst at one of the biggest firms in the city. You're Gregory. And what does that mean?" he yelled. "It means I make $90,000 a year. That's what it means. It doesn't mean Aspen. It doesn't mean the Belmont Club. And it sure as hell doesn't mean whatever that is." He pointed to a massive, gaudy, gold-plated panther statue in the corner. "That," Brenda said, her voice dripping with venom, "is art. It's an investment." "It's plastic," Gregory roared. "I saw the receipt. You're spending money we don't have. You're posting about a life that is a lie." "It's not a lie," Brenda shrieked back. "It's fake it till you make it. It's manifesting. That's something your poor, pathetic, beige ex-wife would never understand. She was happy being nothing. I am trying to make you something." "She was happy," Gregory said, the words catching in his throat. We were happy. We had savings. We had peace. I'd come home and the house was quiet. She'd be reading. It smelled like dinner. Not chemicals and desperation. Brenda's face went rigid. The green mask was cracking. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. "I see. You miss her." "No," Gregory said, too quickly. I miss not feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack every time I check the mail. You miss being comfortable. You miss being poor with her." Brenda advanced on him, jabbing a finger into his chest. "You are weak, Gregory. You were weak when you were with her, and you're weak now. But you're my weakness. You're my husband. And you will not humiliate me. You will not tell me what I can and cannot buy, or what I can and cannot post. We are going to the top, and if you're not strong enough to climb, I will drag you there." She paused, then a sly, cruel smile spread across her face. "In fact, I know just the thing. We need to be seen. We need to prove we belong." She pulled up an email on her phone. "The Prescott Foundation Gala. It's the event of the year. All the VPs, all the CEOs. Everyone will be there." Gregory's stomach turned to ice. "Brenda, we can't. Tickets they're like $10,000 a table." "Not our table," Brenda said, her eyes gleaming. "I've been networking. I friended Mr. Wyatt's assistant, and I mentioned how passionate you are about the Foundation's work. She found 2 tickets for us. We just have to make a donation. $1,000. $1,000, Gregory choked. "Brenda, we don't have $1,000. "We will," Brenda said, picking up his credit card from the counter. "This is it, Greg. This is our chance. This is where we make it. We go, we're seen, we talk to Mr. Wyatt, we talk to his bosses. We show them we're not just adequate. We're exceptional." Gregory watched, paralyzed as she typed the numbers into the donation page. The charge went through. "Now," she said, peeling off her drying mask. "I need a dress, a real one, something that shows them I'm the new Mrs. Gregory." Gregory sank onto the plastic-wrapped sofa, his head in his hands. He felt a migraine coming on. He was in a glass house, and the cracks were spreading so fast he couldn't count them, and he could hear, faint and clear, the sound of a large stone hurtling toward them. The Prescott Foundation annual gala was the undisputed crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was not a party. It was a demonstration of power, a gathering of the old money titans and the new money disruptors who had been deemed worthy. The press was kept at a respectful distance, the security was presidential, and the donation, for a ticket, was merely the first barrier to entry. Brenda was vibrating with manic energy. She had spent 2 weeks preparing. She had rented a dress, a garish, sequined, red monstrosity that was 2 sizes too tight and featured a slit that went dangerously high. She'd had her hair tortured into an intricate, towering updo, and her makeup was layered on for a stage, not a ballroom. "How do I look?" she demanded, preening in the hall mirror of their condo. "It's a lot," Gregory said, tugging at the collar of his rented tuxedo. It smelled faintly of dry cleaning chemicals and another man's sweat. "It's fabulous," Brenda corrected. "It says I have arrived. Now remember the plan. We find Mr. Wyatt. We are charming. We are ambitious. We mention the new Aspen account. I told them we landed it. And we do not leave until we've been photographed with at least one person from the Times." "Brenda, the Times isn't..." Gregory began but gave up. He was exhausted. The $1,000 donation had been followed by the $500 for the dress rental, $300 for her hair and makeup, $200 for the tux, and $150 for the car service, because Brenda had refused to take a taxi. They were over $2,000 in the hole for a single night on a single credit card. Ben's warning echoed in his head. They see everything. They arrived at the Grand Museum, a flood of cameras flashing at the designated press area. Brenda, seeing them, immediately grabbed Gregory's arm and tried to pose. Ma'am, this is the main entrance. Please keep moving," a security guard said, gently but firmly steering her away from the red carpet. "Rude," Brenda muttered, her face souring. They entered the ballroom. It was breathtaking, a sea of quiet, powerful elegance. Women in timeless gowns of velvet and silk, men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. The jewelry was real, but it was quiet. A single perfect strand of pearls, a set of antique diamond earrings. Brenda, in her glittering red sequin tube, stuck out like a fire alarm. People politely looked away. The air was thick with the scent of old money and new orchids. And everyone was more important than them. "There he is," Brenda hissed, digging her nails into Gregory's arm. "Mr. Wyatt." Mr. Wyatt was standing near the main stage, laughing with a group of older men. He was the picture of understated power. He saw Gregory and Brenda approaching, and his smile tightened. "Gregory." "Mrs.," he said, nodding. "Mr. Wyatt, so good to see you," Brenda gushed, stepping in front of Gregory. "We are just so thrilled to be here. The work the foundation does, it's just so important." "It is," Wyatt said, his eyes scanning her dress with a look of mild disbelief. "Glad you donated." "Oh, of course. We're hoping to make a much bigger donation next year," Brenda said, with a high-pitched laugh, "once Gregory's new Aspen account starts really paying off." Wyatt's face went blank. Aspen account? What Aspen account? Gregory's heart stopped. "Brenda, honey." "The one I mentioned," Brenda chirped, oblivious. "He's just so modest. He landed a massive new client, ski resorts, very high-end." Wyatt looked at Gregory. His voice was deathly quiet. "Is that so, Gregory? Because my reports show your client acquisition is flat to negative this quarter. You're lying at an event for a foundation built on integrity." "No," Gregory stammered. "It's not. It's a misunderstanding. She's just excited." "I see." Wyatt's disapproval was a physical force. "If you'll excuse me, I see a real donor I need to speak to." He turned his back on them, leaving them standing alone in the center of the room. Gregory felt the blood drain from his face. He had just, in 1 second, detonated his entire career. He's just playing hard to get, Brenda whispered, her confidence finally cracking. He's old school. He'll come around. He won't, Gregory said, his voice hollow. Brenda, you just... Shh, Brenda hissed. The lights in the ballroom were dimming. The MC, a famous news anchor, was stepping up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your incredible generosity tonight, the anchor began. We are all here to support the Prescott Foundation, and this year we are especially honored. The foundation has been, for decades, helmed by its patriarch, Mr. Robert Prescott. A spotlight hit an older, commanding man at a front table. He had a face like a Roman coin, powerful and severe. He nodded. Gregory recognized him. His blood didn't just run cold, it turned to ice. He'd seen that face once, and only once, 5 years ago, in the front row of his own wedding. He had been introduced as Sophie's Uncle Robert, a quiet, intimidating man who had watched the entire ceremony with a look of profound skepticism. He had shaken Gregory's hand, his grip like steel, and said, "You take care of her. She's more than you know." He hadn't been an uncle. He was the Robert Prescott. Gregory stopped breathing. The MC continued. Mr. Prescott has, for the last year, been overseeing a transition, a new hand at the tiller, a new vision. She has been working quietly, rebuilding the international logistics arm of Prescott Consolidated from the ground up, following a sabbatical of sorts. A murmur went through the crowd. This was new. The Prescott heir was a notorious recluse. No one had seen her in years. "Brenda," Gregory whispered, grabbing her arm. "We have to go, now." "What? Shut up, they're announcing someone," Brenda said, annoyed. "It is my distinct honor," the MC said, his voice booming, "to introduce the new chairwoman of the Prescott Foundation and the new CEO of Prescott Consolidated. Please welcome Ms. Sophie Prescott." The name hit Gregory like a physical blow. No, it's a different Sophie. It's a common name. It can't be. A single spotlight hit the side of the stage. A woman walked out. She was not wearing a simple sweater. She was wearing a custom-made, floor-length gown of the deepest, richest scarlet. Her hair was down, styled in elegant, cascading waves. Around her neck was a single, dazzling necklace of diamonds and rubies that looked like it belonged in a museum. She was poised. She was powerful. She was radiant. She was, without a shadow of a doubt, his Sophie. The poor, beige barista. Brenda, standing next to him, hadn't processed it. She was squinting at the stage. "Wow, she's pretty," Brenda said, a note of jealousy in her voice. What a name." "Sophie Prescott. That's so weird, right? Like, you're Sophie. But, you know, rich and important." Gregory couldn't speak. He was paralyzed, watching the ghost of his past life take the stage, reborn as the most powerful woman in the room. Sophie stepped up to the podium, and the entire 1,000-person ballroom fell into a deafening silence. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was the same. Quiet. Calm. But it held the room. It didn't need to shout. "My father," she began, smiling at Robert Prescott, "always taught me that wealth isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it." Gregory's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "Oh my God," he whispered. Brenda finally looked at him, at his white face, at his trembling hands. And then she looked back at the woman on the stage, really looked at her, the face, the eyes, the quiet, unshakable poise. "Greg?" Brenda's voice was a tiny, frightened squeak. "Greg, Who is that? Gregory could only state the impossible. That, Brenda. That is Sophie. Brenda's mind simply refused to accept the data. No, she said, with a short, sharp, hysterical laugh. That's not. It's a joke. It's a look-alike. You're crazy. That is not her. Our Sophie is... she's poor. But Gregory was transfixed. He was watching the woman on stage, and all the quirks he had once found endearing and later frustrating suddenly snapped into focus. Her pickiness about quality? It wasn't pickiness. It was the standard of someone used to the best. Her simple sweaters? They were Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli. Her old car, a prototype. Her hobby, coffee shop. It wasn't a business. It was a diversion. He had been married to the sun and had complained it wasn't a light bulb. Sophie's speech was brilliant. Not just polite, it was brilliant. She spoke about new logistic chain solutions for delivering medical aid, about sustainable urban real estate development for a circular economy. She was an expert. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the boss. She commanded the stage with an ease he had never, ever seen. When she finished, the room, which had been holding its collective breath, exploded. A standing ovation, not a polite one, a roaring one. Mr. Wyatt was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands were red. Robert Prescott was beaming, wiping a tear from his eye. Sophie smiled, nodded, and walked off the stage, directly into the arms of her father, who hugged her tightly. And then she began to work the room. This was the moment Brenda, in her delusional state, had been waiting for, the networking part of the evening. This is it, Brenda whispered, her voice trembling, but still, somehow, arrogant. This is our chance. We go up, we say hi. This imposter. We'll see what she says. This is some kind of weird rich person prank. Brenda, no, Gregory hissed, grabbing her arm. We are leaving. Now. No! Brenda wrenched her arm free. You're scared. I'm not. I'm going to find out what's going on. She began to march, with a desperate, self-important stride, toward the knot of people now surrounding Sophie. Gregory, trapped by a tidal wave of shame and horror, had no choice but to stumble after her. Sophie was in a tight circle with her father, Robert, and the man Brenda had so spectacularly insulted, Mr. Wyatt. And the Q4 projections for the Singapore hub are impressive, Sophie. Truly, Wyatt was saying. It was a team effort, Matthew, Sophie replied. Matthew? Gregory thought. She called Mr. Wyatt. Matthew? Excuse me. The circle turned. Brenda had pushed her way to the front, dragging Gregory with her. Brenda stood there in her tight, rented, sequined dress, facing the scarlet-gowned CEO. She was like a yapping terrier challenging a lioness. Sophie, Brenda said, her voice a high-pitched caricature of friendliness. Darling, I didn't know you had a twin. Or, is this like a new look for the coffee shop? A promotion? The circle went utterly silent. Robert Prescott's smile vanished. Mr. Wyatt's jaw dropped. Sophie looked at her. No anger, no surprise. Just a deep, bottomless, and profound pity. Brenda. Gregory, Sophie said, her voice as calm as it was when she was offering a cappuccino. I see you got your tickets. Gregory was going to be sick. He could feel the eyes of his ultimate boss, Mr. Wyatt, boring into the side of his skull. Robert Prescott, the patriarch, stepped forward. He was a foot taller than Brenda and radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying power. He looked Brenda up and down, his gaze lingering on the sequin-straining seams. Sophie, Robert said, his voice a low rumble. Who are these people? This was the moment Brenda had been waiting for. She puffed up her chest. I'm Brenda," she announced. "Gregory's wife, his new wife. And he," she pointed a long, acrylic-nailed finger at Gregory, "is her ex-husband." The silence stretched. Then Mr. Wyatt, Matthew, did the last thing Gregory expected. He burst out laughing. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a full, back-slapping, tear-wiping laugh. "Oh, son," Wyatt choked out, pointing at Gregory. "Oh, Gregory, you stupendous fool! You... He couldn't even finish. Gregory was no longer a man. He was a punchline. Brenda's face crumpled in confusion. "What? What's so funny?" "You are, sweetheart," Wyatt said, wiping his eye. "You are." Sophie held up a hand. The laughter stopped. "Father." "Matthew," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is, as she said, Gregory. And his wife, Brenda." "Father," Brenda whispered, her fake tan suddenly looking green. "Father!" Robert Prescott looked at Gregory, not with anger, with academic curiosity, like a scientist studying a particularly disappointing mold. "So this," Robert said, his voice quiet, "is what you left my daughter for. This loud, desperate caricature." Gregory tried to speak, but no sound came out. But, she's poor!" Brenda finally shrieked, the last retaining wall of her delusion crumbling. "The shop, the beige, she's a barista. She said she was holding you back. She was. She was holding something back, that's for sure," Mr. Wyatt muttered. Sophie finally sighed. She stepped forward, the diamonds on her neck flashing, and the entire chaotic, painful truth came pouring out. "I was never poor, Brenda," Sophie said, and the entire gala, it seemed, had quieted down to listen to this bizarre central drama. "When I decided to marry Gregory," Sophie continued, her eyes finding his, "I wanted to be sure. I wanted a real life, not a Prescott life. I wanted to be just Sophie, to be loved for me." She turned her gaze to her father. "My father disapproved of the marriage. He disapproved of Gregory." Robert Prescott grunted. Man was a mid-level analyst with weak projections. I knew he had no grit. "Father," Sophie chided gently, "we made an agreement, a test of sorts. I would live as Sophie, without the family name, without the portfolio for 5 years. I would build a life on my own, with my husband, to prove our love was real and not a transaction." Gregory remembered. The prenup. He had thought it was a simple, standard document. He hadn't read the fine print. His own lawyer, paid for by, he now realized, her, had glossed over it. "The coffee shop. It's mine," Sophie said. "It's the one thing I built for myself. It's small, but it's profitable. It's debt-free, and it's mine. It was my real life, my anchor." But, Brenda was stammering, her brain smoking. "But the agreement," Sophie said, her voice hardening, "had a term. It was a 5-year contract. It expired, or it could be terminated." Gregory's heart thudded. He knew. He knew what was coming. "It could be terminated by a divorce," Sophie finished. "The divorce was finalized 6 months and 12 days ago." She looked at Gregory, a sad, knowing look in her eye. "The day you filed, Gregory, the day you told me I was static and unambitious, was the day I legally resumed my duties as a full-time board member of Prescott Consolidated. And 2 months ago," Robert Prescott boomed, stepping forward, "after she restructured our entire European logistics division in a quarter, the board unanimously voted her in as CEO, taking my job." He beamed with pride. "The coffee shop is her hobby. A place she goes to remember what was, for a time, a simpler life." The pieces were all slotting into place, and the picture they formed was of Gregory's and Brenda's. Total, abject ruin. Brenda looked at Gregory, her eyes wide with animal-like panic. But, you were holding him back. That's what you said. You're poor. Brenda, stop saying poor, Gregory finally snapped, his voice a broken, desperate cry. Mr. Wyatt, Matthew, stepped in. His face was no longer amused. It was cold. Mom. Holding him back? Let me clarify the situation for you. He spoke to Brenda, but his eyes were locked on Gregory. Gregory here. He's been an adequate employee for 6 years. We knew. I knew. The day he married Ms. Prescott. Robert, he nodded to the patriarch, keeps a close eye on his investments. We were watching Gregory. We were curious to see if he was worthy of the woman who had given up a kingdom for him. Wyatt leaned in. For a while, he was. He was a good husband, a decent employee. We protected him. But then, he got ambitious. He got resentful. He started seeing his wife's integrity as a weakness. He didn't realize her strength was the only thing keeping his job. Wyatt's voice dropped to a corporate executioner's whisper. The moment he filed for divorce, he was no longer family-in-law. He was no longer protected. He was just Gregory, an average underperforming analyst with a shocking amount of new debt. Brenda's face, already pale, went chalk white. Debt? What? Debt? Wyatt smiled, a thin, cruel line. Oh, we see everything. The condo you can't afford. The new car, leased at 24% APR. The $1,000 donation for these tickets, put on a card that is $8,400 over its limit. And, oh, this is my favorite, the Aspen account. He looked at Brenda. You didn't land an account. You just committed wire fraud. I just spoke to the CEO of that ski resort. He has no idea who you are, but he is one of my oldest friends. And he's not happy, and neither am I. It was over. Brenda's entire, carefully constructed, fake-it-till-you-make-it world had just been obliterated in 60 seconds. Gregory was just gone. A shell. He was looking at Sophie, at the woman he'd had, the life he'd thrown away, the billions he'd thrown away. He'd traded an empire for this. Brenda, her eyes rolling back in her head, did the only thing she could. She fainted, crashing to the marble floor in a heap of cheap sequins and broken dreams. No one rushed to help her. Gregory just stared at her, then back at Sophie. Sophie just looked at him. Her eyes were not angry. They were empty. She had already moved on. I really did love you, Gregory, she said, her voice barely a whisper, just for him. I loved our little life. You were the one who thought it was poor. I thought it was the richest thing I'd ever have. She turned her back on him. She turned her back on the wife on the floor and the husband in ruins. Now, Matthew, she said, her voice clear and bright, all business. You were telling me about the Q4 projections for Singapore. She walked away, a queen in her own right, leaving a wake of destruction she had not caused, but had, finally, brought to light. The aftermath was not swift. It was a slow, grinding, and absolute foreclosure on a life built of lies. The gala incident became the stuff of legend. In the quiet, powerful circles of the city, Gregory was a new cautionary tale. He wasn't just a fool. He was the fool, the man who divorced the Prescott heiress, because he thought she was poor. He was a laughing stock. Mr. Wyatt, Matthew, did not fire Gregory the next day. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, Gregory arrived at his office to find he had been moved. His cubicle was gone. He was now at a small grey desk in the basement, in the archives department. His new job was file digitization. He was scanning old, adequate performance reviews from 1980. His pay was cut by 40%, citing departmental restructuring. He was now making just enough to not be able to declare bankruptcy, but not nearly enough to service the mountain of debt he and Brenda had accrued. Brenda, meanwhile, had not bounced back. When Gregory came home from his new, humiliating job, she was just there, on the couch. The condo was being foreclosed on. The car had already been repossessed. Her influencer life was over. Her 2,000 followers had heard the real story, and she was a pariah. She had to get a job, a real one. The final, crushing blow of karma was delivered on a rainy Tuesday. Brenda, her hair back to its natural, mousy brown, her acrylics gone, stood in a polyester blend, mustard yellow uniform. She had a notepad. "Welcome to the Belmont Grill," she said, her voice dead. "Can I get you a starter?" She was a waitress at the casual dining, non-member, public-facing restaurant attached to the Belmont Club, the one she had bragged about. She wasn't in the club. She was serving B-list burgers to the people waiting for their cars. Gregory, meanwhile, lasted 3 months in the basement. He finally quit when he couldn't take the quiet, pitying looks from the janitors. He was unemployable. The name Gregory on a resume in his field was a red flag. He was last seen as a barista at a generic corporate coffee chain in the suburbs. He was, in a cruel twist, making minimum wage, serving the sugary, terrible fraps Brenda had once demanded. The glass house had shattered, and they were left to pick up the pieces, barefoot and bleeding. And Sophie? Sophie's life went on. The Page and Bean was still her sanctuary. She'd given Maria a massive raise and paid for the rest of her law school. She was there, one rainy Saturday afternoon, a few months later. The gala was a distant memory. She was in her uniform, a simple sweater, jeans. She was reading a book, the smell of coffee and old paper surrounding her. She was at peace. She was content. The bell above the door jingled. A man walked in, shaking the rain from his coat. He looked to be in his late 40s, with kind eyes, a tweed jacket, and a genuinely warm smile. He was a visiting professor at the university, Sophie would learn. He looked around the quiet, warm cafe, and his eyes landed on her. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice as warm as the room. "But this place looks perfect. Is this seat taken?" He gestured to the empty armchair across from her. Sophie looked up from her book. She looked at the empty chair, and then at the kind-faced man. And for the first time, in a very, very long time, she smiled, a real, genuine, unguarded smile. "No," Sophie Prescott said, "it's free." And so Sophie, the woman who had everything, but only ever wanted one real thing, finally found peace, not in the billions of dollars or the CEO title, but in the simple, quiet life she had tried to build from the beginning. Brenda and Gregory learned the hard way that the appearance of wealth is a hollow, fragile thing. They built their house on a foundation of lies and cheap credit, and a single gust of truth brought it all crashing down. They learned that what you have will never, ever be as important as what you are. What did you think of Sophie's story? Do you think Gregory deserved his fate? Or was Brenda the real villain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We tell stories like this every week. Stories of karma, revenge, and the truth always coming out. If you enjoyed this, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel so you never miss a single story. Thank you for listening.